The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen as I diced vegetables, stirring the simmering sauce that would be the highlight of tonight's dinner. I wanted everything to be perfect for Emma. We hadn't had a proper evening together in what felt like ages, and I thought a homemade meal would be a good way to reconnect. I hummed along to the soft music playing in the background, imagining the look on her face when she saw the candlelit setup. I glanced at the time. She would be home any minute, and I still had to set the table and change out of my cooking clothes. As I passed by the coat rack to get to the dining room, my eye caught the edge of her jacket, the one she'd worn yesterday. Without thinking, I reached for it, planning to hang it up neatly in the closet. When I lifted the jacket, something slipped from the pocket and fluttered to the floor. I knelt down and picked it up, assuming it was a receipt or maybe a grocery list. But as my eyes adjusted to the small, square piece of paper, I realized it was a train ticket. The words Willow Creek were printed boldly across the top, with a date from just last week. I felt an uneasy chill run down my spine. Emma hadn't mentioned anything about going to Willow Creek. In fact, that day, she'd told me she was working late, an all-hands meeting or something. The memory of her words came back to me, clear as day, and I felt a strange tightening in my chest. Holding the ticket in my hand, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd just gone to meet a friend and forgot to tell me. But why wouldn't she mention it, especially after saying she'd been at work? Questions spiraled through my mind, doubts rising like a wave I couldn't contain. The door opened, and Emma stepped in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped as she dropped her bag by the door. The sight of her, so familiar yet suddenly so unknowable, filled me with a sense of unease I couldn't shake. "Oh, you're home early," she said, surprised. "And, wow, are you cooking?" I swallowed, tucking the ticket into my pocket, suddenly feeling foolish for even thinking this way. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But the thought wouldn't leave me alone. "Yeah, I thought we could have a nice night together," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled, a genuine smile that softened her tired eyes. For a moment, I almost forgot about the ticket, about the questions that plagued me. But then, before I could stop myself, I spoke. "By the way, I found something, a train ticket. To Willow Creek." I tried to keep my tone casual, hoping she wouldn't notice the tremor in my voice. Emma's smile faltered, her eyes flicking to mine with a hint of something, surprise, maybe even a flash of fear. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a careful neutrality. "Oh, that," she said, pausing just a beat too long. I went to visit an old friend. Last-minute thing. I didn't want to bother you with it." My heart skipped a beat. Something felt off, the way her words felt too measured, too rehearsed. "An old friend?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though the weight of suspicion pressed heavily on my chest. "Why didn't you just tell me?" She looked down, shifting her weight slightly. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she said with a small shrug. "You were busy that day, and it was just a quick trip." "Just a quick trip," I echoed, feeling the words sink heavily between us. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her the way I always had. But her expression, there was something in her eyes, a hesitation, that felt wrong. "Look, if it bothers you, I'm sorry," she added, her voice softening. "I didn't mean to keep it from you." She reached for my hand, her fingers warm against my skin. But I could feel a tension there, an unspoken divide that hadn't been there before. It was as though the train ticket had shifted everything, pulling us apart in ways I didn't yet understand. I took a breath, trying to clear my mind. "Emma, if there's something I should know, please, just tell me." Her hand slipped from mine, and she glanced away, her voice barely a whisper. "There's nothing, really. It was just a friend." The silence stretched between us, thick with words neither of us dared to say. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to brush off the feeling twisting inside me. But the image of that ticket was seared into my mind, a silent reminder that maybe things weren't as simple as they seemed. The days after finding the ticket felt surreal, like I was living in a version of my life that didn't quite fit. I went through the motions, work, chores, dinners with Emma, but beneath it all was a new and uneasy rhythm, a subtle, gnawing distrust that tainted everything. It started with little things. Her phone would ping late at night, and she'd quickly silence it, tucking it under her pillow. She seemed more guarded, closing her laptop as soon as I entered the room or brushing off questions about her day with vague answers. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it, that I was overanalyzing, but my mind kept circling back to that ticket and the look in her eyes when I asked about it. One evening, as she was in the shower, I noticed her phone left on the kitchen counter. I knew it was wrong, that I was crossing a line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. My hand hovered over her phone, my heart pounding with a mix of shame and anticipation. Finally, I picked it up and scrolled through her messages. My stomach dropped when I saw a text conversation with someone named Daniel. They'd been messaging frequently, and while the conversation seemed friendly, there was a familiarity in their exchanges that felt too intimate. In one message, he'd written, "Last week was incredible. I can't wait until next time." She hadn't replied to that one, but the fact that she hadn't deleted it made me wonder if she wanted to keep it hidden in plain sight, some quiet rebellion that she thought I'd never notice. When she came out of the shower, I was back in the living room, trying to act natural, but my mind was reeling. Later that night, as we were lying in bed, I couldn't keep the question in any longer. "Hey, Emma," I began, keeping my tone light, "I saw some texts from a guy named Daniel on your phone." "Who is he?" She stiffened slightly, her fingers pausing as she brushed her hair. "Daniel?" she echoed, feigning nonchalance. "He's just an old friend from college. We reconnected a few months ago." "An old friend?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice even. "Funny, I don't remember you mentioning him before." She gave a small laugh, a hollow sound. "Well, I didn't think it was important. He's just someone I talk to once in a while." I nodded slowly, but I could feel my doubts deepening. "You guys seem pretty close." "I saw his message about last week." What was incredible about it? There was a brief flash of panic in her eyes before she forced a smile. "He's just being dramatic. We met up for lunch, that's all. I didn't realize you'd be so interested in my friends." Her tone had an edge to it, a defensive note that made me feel like I was the one crossing a line. But I couldn't stop myself. "Emma, it's not that I'm interested. It's that you didn't tell me. That trip to Willow Creek, was it to meet him?" She sighed, a frustrated sound. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, honestly. I told you, it was a casual thing, just a friendly visit." "A friendly visit?" I repeated, feeling the words leave a bitter taste in my mouth. "Then why didn't you just tell me?" She looked away, her face tightening. "Because I knew you'd react like this, making it into something it's not. I didn't want to deal with this drama." "Drama?" I could feel my voice rising, but I fought to keep calm. "Emma, I'm not trying to start anything. I just want to understand why you're keeping things from me." Her silence said everything, her face a closed door I couldn't open. She gave a dismissive shrug, pulling the blanket over herself and rolling away from me, as if that would end the conversation. The following days only added fuel to my suspicions. I found myself watching her more closely, catching glimpses of her on her phone, her thumb moving quickly across the screen before she'd lock it when I walked into the room. It was like every moment held a clue, a piece of some puzzle I hadn't fully realized I was solving. One evening, after she'd left for a meeting with friends, I decided to go through our shared laptop. I hated myself for it, but I felt trapped in this cycle of suspicion, desperate to know if I was wrong, or if there was truly something she was hiding. It didn't take long before I found a folder buried in a seldom-used section of the hard drive. Inside were photos of her with Daniel. Some were from years ago, old college photos, but there were recent ones too. There was one of them in a park, his arm around her shoulders, her face tilted up to him, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. I felt my stomach twist as I stared at the image. I could almost hear their laughter, the ease between them, a closeness that now felt like a betrayal. When she got home that night, I was waiting for her in the kitchen, the photo open on my phone. I didn't even bother with a pretense of calm. "So," I said, holding up the phone as she walked in, I suppose this is just a friendly meeting too. She froze, her face draining of color as she took in the photo. But then she straightened, her gaze hardening. You went through my laptop, she asked, her voice low and tight. Yes, I replied, refusing to look away. And I'm glad I did. I had to find out the truth somehow, since you clearly weren't going to tell me. Her mouth tightened, her fists clenching at her sides. The truth, she repeated bitterly. You don't know anything about the truth. You're jumping to conclusions, snooping around, digging through my things. What does that say about you? What does it say about me? I shot back, feeling my own anger flare. What does it say about you, Emma, that I feel the need to do this? I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd go through my wife's things, but here we are. And it's because you've given me nothing but reasons to doubt you. She stared at me, a mixture of anger and hurt in her eyes. Maybe if you trusted me, we wouldn't be in this position. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Trust? You broke that when you started lying to me. So don't stand there and act like this is my fault. She clenched her jaw, looking away, her shoulders tense. For a moment, I thought she might say something that would finally explain everything. But instead, she turned on her heel and walked toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I was left standing alone in the kitchen, the silence around me thick with all the words that had been left unspoken. The pieces of the puzzle lay scattered in my mind, a picture forming that I didn't want to see, a truth that I wished I didn't know. But there was no turning back now, the damage was done, and I could feel our world crumbling, one bitter discovery at a time. The air in our house felt thick with tension, each passing moment heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I barely slept after that night, the flickering shadows of doubt and anger haunting me in the dark. Emma and I shared the same bed, but it felt like we were worlds apart, two strangers held together by the remnants of what once was. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing as I tried to formulate a plan for the inevitable confrontation. Finally, the day came. I couldn't put it off any longer. The images of her and Daniel were burned into my memory, and I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I had to confront her, had to pull back the curtain on the deception that had taken root in our lives. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with her legs curled beneath her, a book open but clearly unread. The television flickered in the background, but her mind was far away. I could see the tension in her posture, the way her shoulders tensed when I entered the room. Emma, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but filled with an urgency I couldn't suppress. She looked up, her expression guarded, as if she were bracing for impact. About what? She asked, her tone dismissive, but I could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. About Daniel, I replied, crossing my arms, trying to project calm despite the storm brewing inside me. And the trip to Willow Creek. I need to know the truth. Her brow furrowed, and she set the book aside, her defenses immediately rising. I've already told you everything you need to know. It was just a friend's visit, just a friend. I challenged, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You're asking me to believe that after everything I've seen? That photo, the way you keep your phone locked every time I walk in the room, you can't honestly think I just accept that explanation. Emma sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to ward off a headache. Why are you doing this? You're making it seem like I'm some kind of criminal, because you are hiding something from me. I said, my voice shaking slightly with frustration. I found that photo of you two in the park, laughing, looking so damn happy together. And all I can think is, why wasn't I the one you wanted to share that happiness with? What happened to us? I can't believe you went through my things, she shot back, her voice laced with hurt. This isn't fair. You're invading my privacy and accusing me of things I haven't done. I took a step closer, desperation creeping into my voice. Emma, I don't want to accuse you. I just need you to be honest with me. If there's something going on, I need to know. We can work through it, but I can't do this if you keep lying to me. Her eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her defenses. I'm not lying to you, she said quietly. I told you Daniel is just a friend. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think you'd react like this. Then what about Willow Creek? What happened there? I pressed, leaning in as if the closer I got, the more likely she was to spill the truth. Her expression hardened again, and she folded her arms tightly across her chest, a barrier against my probing. It was nothing. I needed a break. I was overwhelmed, and he was there. Can't I have a friend without it being a betrayal? But it feels like a betrayal. I exclaimed, my patience wearing thin. You're not being honest with me, and it feels like you're hiding something important. This is more than just having a friend, Emma. You went to see him without telling me. You lied. Tears welled in her eyes, and she shook her head, frustration bubbling over. You don't understand. I was trying to protect you, to protect us. I thought you'd be angry, and I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to hurt you, but you are hurting me. I countered, my voice softer now, the fight beginning to drain from me. Every day that you keep this from me is another day I feel like I'm losing you. It's like there's a wall between us, and I don't know how to break it down. She turned away, wiping a tear from her cheek, and I felt a pang of guilt. I didn't want to push her away, but I was desperate for answers, for some semblance of trust to rebuild what felt so irrevocably broken. Emma, please, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Just tell me the truth. I want to understand. I love you, but this isn't how it's supposed to be. She looked at me then, her expression shifting, and for a moment, I thought I saw the glimmer of the woman I fell in love with. I didn't mean for it to come to this, she confessed, her voice trembling. I wanted to talk to you about it, but I was scared. I didn't know how to bring it up. Scared of what? I asked, my heart aching at the pain in her eyes. Of losing me? Yes, she burst out, her voice cracking. I didn't want to lose you, and I thought if I kept it to myself, it would be easier. But it's not. It's just made everything worse. The weight of her words hung in the air, and I felt the sharp sting of my own realization, that we had both been living in fear, avoiding the truth instead of facing it together. I reached for her hand, wanting to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Emma, I said softly, we need to face this together. I can't promise I won't be hurt, but I can promise I'll try to understand. Just please, be honest with me. She hesitated, searching my face for something, hope, maybe. I'll try, she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's complicated. It's not just black and white. I know, I replied, squeezing her hand gently. But we have to start somewhere. As she took a deep breath, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of tearing down those walls, of finding a way back to each other. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty. We had begun the conversation, but the true reckoning had yet to come. The air was thick with uncertainty as I sat across from Emma at the kitchen table, the remnants of our last conversation hanging between us like a fragile thread. I had hoped that by confronting her, we could start rebuilding the trust that had been so brutally shattered. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to feel like a distant memory. The silence in our home grew louder, filled with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Despite my resolve to understand and heal, I found myself spiraling into a dark place. Each late-night text she received from Daniel gnawed at my insides, and each time she smiled at her phone, I felt like my heart was being squeezed in a vice. I tried to dismiss my anger, tried to focus on rebuilding what we had, but the more I tried, the more the resentment festered. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, I scrolled through my phone, mindlessly browsing social media. A post caught my eye, a photo of Emma and Daniel at a local coffee shop, their faces bright with laughter, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard in ages. It was too much to bear. The overwhelming sense of betrayal crashed over me like a wave, and I felt an impulse to do something, anything, to retaliate. I put down my phone and ran my fingers through my hair, feeling the weight of my frustration pressing down on me. This wasn't the way I wanted to feel. I didn't want to be this person, consumed by jealousy and anger. But as I thought of the betrayal, the image of them together loomed larger, and a dark thought crept into my mind. what if I could make her feel the same way I did? The next day, I set my plan into motion. I decided to meet Daniel under the guise of wanting to clear the air. I found his social media and sent him a direct message, playing it cool and casual. "Hey, Daniel. We should talk. Can we meet up sometime?" I felt a sick thrill at the prospect of confronting him. Maybe this was reckless, but the thought of him sitting across from me, unaware of my motives, filled me with a twisted sense of empowerment. I wanted him to understand the chaos he had stirred in our lives. When I met him at a local bar, I tried to maintain a calm facade, but inside I was a storm of conflicting emotions. He looked just as I expected, easygoing, confident, completely oblivious to the turmoil he had caused. "Hey man, thanks for agreeing to meet up," he said, extending his hand. "What's up?" "Just wanted to talk about Emma," I said, my voice steady, even as my heart raced. I was struck by how casual he seemed, like he was just discussing the weather. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sure, what do you want to know?" I narrowed my eyes, feeling the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "What's your relationship with her, really? Because I need to know how deep this friendship goes." He shrugged, his demeanor relaxed. "We're just friends. She reached out a while back, and we've been catching up." "It's nothing serious, nothing serious." I echoed, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it in check. "You think it's nothing serious to go on trips together, to take pictures like that?" He raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his expression. "Dude, it's just coffee. You sound pretty insecure." "I'm not insecure," I shot back, the bitterness spilling from my lips. "I'm just tired of being the last to know. You think this is just some casual thing? She's my wife." He leaned forward, his tone shifting as he finally seemed to grasp the weight of what I was saying. "Look, man. I didn't mean to cross any lines. I thought she was single." "Single?" I snapped, feeling my fists clench. "She's married. And yet you're here, acting like it's no big deal." He held up his hands in surrender, but there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "I didn't know. If I had, I would have backed off. But I can't control how she feels, you know." The realization hit me hard. Daniel didn't owe me anything. The real betrayal was Emma's, not his. And yet, here I was, trying to assign blame to the wrong person. I felt anger twist in my gut, directed at both of them, but it was Emma's choices that haunted me the most. After our conversation, I walked home with a storm brewing inside me. I knew deep down that seeking revenge wouldn't heal the wounds, but the thought of Emma with someone else twisted like a knife in my heart. I felt betrayed, isolated, and filled with a need for retaliation. That night, as I lay awake, the dim light of the moon spilling into our bedroom, I heard Emma's soft breathing next to me. My heart ached with confusion. I thought about what it would mean to confront her again, to lay bare my pain, but a part of me was tempted to keep that pain inside, to let it fester. As dawn broke, I heard her stir beside me, and I turned to see her eyes flutter open. She smiled softly, but I couldn't return it. Instead, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. "Emma," I began, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "We need to talk about Daniel. I met him yesterday." Her smile faded, and a look of dread washed over her face. "You did what?" "I confronted him about you too," I said, feeling the anger surge. "He didn't know you were married, Emma. He thought you were just some girl he could have fun with." She sat up, her expression shifting to panic. "You went to him? Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to understand what was going on," I replied, the frustration spilling out. "You have to see how this looks from my side. You're keeping secrets, and it's killing me." "I never meant for this to happen," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I thought I could manage it, but I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me? By lying to me? By keeping this whole relationship secret?" I asked, incredulous. "Do you even understand how much you've hurt me?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I felt a pang of guilt, but the anger refused to dissipate. "I just needed someone to talk to, someone who understood what I was going through, she said, her voice breaking. But it never should have gone this far. I shook my head, my heart heavy. It's not just about you anymore. You've put us in a position where I can't trust you. And now I don't know if I can move past this. Please, she begged, reaching for my hand. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much it would affect you. I thought I could have a life outside of our problems. But we're supposed to be a team, Emma. I exclaimed, pulling my hand away. You don't get to make those decisions alone. You don't get to hide things from me. The silence stretched between us, charged with the weight of our words. I could see the conflict in her eyes, regret, confusion, and a deep-seated love that still flickered beneath the hurt. But the reality was that the trust had been broken, and no amount of apologies could mend the damage that had been done. I'm scared, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared that I've ruined everything. Maybe you have, I said softly, my heart aching as I realized the depth of what we were facing. I didn't want it to end like this, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt trapped between my love for her and the betrayal that had reshaped our lives. That morning, as the sun rose over our home, I understood the harsh truth. In my desire for revenge and understanding, I had begun to lose sight of the love we once shared. I was faced with a choice that would determine our future, to let the anger consume me or to fight for what we still had left. And for the first time, I questioned whether the path to healing would lead us back to each other or to the end of our marriage.